The tomboy then released him, and to Lincoln's surprise she sat down in a wheelchair. Like Lincoln, Ronaldo was wearing a gown, meaning she too was a patient. What shocked him even more was that the Hispanic girl had a cast on one of her legs, as well as a hand wrapped in bandages. Her backpack hung idly on the back of her seat, its sagging appearance indicating something heavy was inside. "What happened to you?" the boy yelped, as he could barely contain himself. Ronaldo glanced down her hand. "You remember anything about what happened at the warehouse?" "Warehouse?" Lincoln repeated, glancing away from her as he started to mull in thought. Like a flash of lightning, several images burned around his mind, none of them being pleasant. The boy jolted up and shut his tight eye, bringing a hand that was to his head, sucking in like a hiss of air. If Ronaldo nearly jumped out of her seat, placing a good hand on his shoulder while questioning if he was all right. The heart monitor spiked a little before it settled down as Lincoln came down from the sudden shock. "Lincoln?" she asked once more. "What happened?" The boy removed shaky from his hand from his head, looking down at his clothed body. "What happened to Lynn? What about you guys and my sisters?" He then touched a bandage that covered his eye, soon registering more medical tape wrapped around the top of his head. How long was I out?" "Easy, Lamo. One question at a time," the tomboy chided before continuing. "You both are really lucky you made it out of there. When the exit started to collapse, we all thought that we would have been hit, and you managed to get this far. So only we did end up catching you guys die right in front of us." Her face became a bit grim. "Well, the ceiling did fall on you guys. Lynn took a few hits for you, and like her life depended on it. It was easier to dig you out, but it was harder to get Lynn. It didn't help that the cops are coming, so we had to be quick." "Where is she?" Lincoln spoke quietly as he turned towards her. "She's still in ICU. Has been there ever since you got here." Lincoln opened his mouth, but Ronaldo quickly added, "And before you ask, you've both been in freaking comas for almost a week." "Still in ICU? Hasn't ever been since you got here?" Lincoln then opened his mouth, but Ronaldo quickly added, "And before you asked, you both have been in freaking comas for almost a week again." "Is that how much time has passed from the one?" the loud mentally noted, as he moved his hand right up to only find the strong resistance as he did so. Raising a brow, the boy then turned his head to find an unpleasant sight. A pair of handcuffs were connected from his bed to the ceiling railing of the bed. Ronaldo pierced her lips. "One of the doctors found out who you two were, and they called the cops. As to prove their point, there was a faint sound on the radio chatter just from beyond the rooms, which was followed by someone responding to the receiver." Lincoln gave a mixed sigh with sadness and frustration, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Don't be. This is my fault." The lieutenant raised his brow. "What do you mean? If I hadn't fought to do this, none of us would be here right now. Lynn would nearly be beating me to death to get her point across." He set his free hand down, clasping his hands together around his knees. "I was too dumb to notice that my sisters were trying to get me to change my tactics, and I was full of myself to realize what was going on until it was too late. And now everyone is suffering after what happened days ago." Lincoln then laid back on his pillows, his eyes becoming a tad wet from his tone, as he went on without any traces of happiness. "The full house is in shambles. Lincoln might be on her deathbed for all I know because of me. And then you and the others probably are in no condition to do much of anything." His nostrils flared. A little savvy crime fighter fought to came back a few tears, believing he didn't have the right to cry now. "I deserve to rot in prison, since I can't even cut out as being a hero." Ronaldo then stared at the loud boy, her mouth wide open, wondering if either they grew a second head or gotten a bigger concussion. Then when she realized, after being buried alive, the amount of nonsense that just spewed out from the ailing mouth was so disgusting to her that it almost made her had the urge to vomit. Her body trembled as a storm brewing inside her, knuckles turning from white from how hard the gunslinger was dropping an arm on her seat. Her eyes gained over a slight twitch to take longer, the stared boy in front of her trying and falling to understand understand what made Lincoln go in a spiral of self-doubt like this. The more the answer continued to dull her, the angrier Ronaldo started to become. Seconds later, the Latina grew tired of trying to solve the puzzle. Her anger started to boil over, exposing her clenched teeth. The tomboy raised a hand, instinctively formed into a fist. Taking a precise aim, Ronaldo did the only thing she could find was the most sensible solution on the table. Lincoln recoiled as moderate. A blunt force smacked his cheek. His body slowly tilted towards his knight from the stock from the impact that was on his daze. "Are you kidding me, Lincoln?" Ronaldo screeched into his ear, and the savvy hero rubbed the sore spot. "How in the world is any of this your fault? Sure," her voice lowered a bit, "you may have been stubborn to take their bounty on you and your sister's head. Your sisters? And almost got away with murdering another villain, going against the moral of all of you were swore to uphold? Your freaking sisters!" Ronaldo protrated him again with his chest those 3 words. Okay, just don't hurt me again," Lincoln pleaded, as he raised his hands defensively, shifting away from the enraged gunslinger as a bed would allow. Ronaldo panted a bit, and her anger and rage began to subdue, taking her first few moments to stare directly at Lincoln's eye. She could see the huge amount of uncertainty, guilt, and fear over the numerous things sitting behind the pupil, making her realize that yelling at him was the very last thing he needed right now. As her mind cleared further, the Latina knew she just had to use a softer approach. Ronaldo then began to breathe in through her nose and exhaled through the mouth, turning her hair parallel with the bed. The gunslinger gingerly climbed in, wincing a little as her cast was brushed off the railing. Lincoln wanted to watch her carefully as Ronaldo sat herself next to him, soon finding himself trapped within a comforting embrace. "I didn't mean to yell at you, Lincoln. It's just that you were fully prepared to handle your sisters, and whatever consequences were, all of us were behind you, and we wouldn't even dare to leave you face this alone. That is why when you said all this stuff before being at your fault," Ronaldo turned to him, "it felt like I didn't know you. I was like staring at some weird kid who's total coward and not the person I..." She pierced her lips as she glanced away, and all Lincoln could see was a faint red tint on her cheeks. "The one person I love." The blush went away as Ronaldo looked at him again. "I don't know what Lynn or whoever it was that told you, but none of this is your fault, Lincoln. We followed you because you were a guy who stands for the good of all, and we would do it again without question. We are your friends after all, and Lily still considers you as the only real family she has left." The Latina then kissed the spot where she had punched him, causing the boy to blush feverishly. Ronaldo then gave a sincere smile at this. "But we both know I am more than that." How are you so frightening, yet sweet at the same time?" Lincoln finally managed to stammer out a crook at the smile took shape. "I could ask you, you're such a dork, yet humble," the assassin replied, pulling him closer. Lincoln moved his arm a bit until it wrapped comfortably around his wrists. "Besides, if it worth anything, I'd say we came out of that fight better than you and your other sisters." The boy raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Ronaldo hummed a bit and recalled many injuries best she could. "On our side, it's just me and you that are here. Queen sent a shard in my leg and my hand, and Lynn beat you near death. Even though you already admitted it, I could right away some of those bruises that weren't falling from the concrete. Another doctor said it looked like you had a blunt trauma from someone hitting your ribs because of the size of the bruise." She gently rubbed a cloth over her covered eye. "Mom says you're lucky to have this one, but you won't be able to use it for a while." "Your mom's a doctor?" "Yeah, thought you knew that." Her eyes appeared to be crestfallen as she moved over the bit of news. "She also knows what I do as a hero. Long story short it is..." Her nostrils then flared a bit as her eyes became a tad watery. "It's complicated. Mom doesn't want me to go fight with you guys anymore, But I told her the reason for it, and she kind of understands why. But at the same time, she doesn't want to lose me too. You know? Bobby hasn't woken up yet either? Lincoln asked, his look matching hers. Ronaldo gave a curt nod. I know me and my mom have only each other now. Her grip tightened a bit around the loud side. But I just can't sit around and not do anything. I mean, I need time to heal, now that with this busted leg. She gestured a bit towards the cast. But I couldn't have leave you with anyone else to fend for themselves. I've done things that even someone like you would refuse to do, and the city has been safer because of that. Lincoln nodded in agreement. The amount of homicides that went down on a weekly basis as the murderers that had been usually found a bullet within their heads. A grisly as it was. I want to listen to Mom, but I also want to keep her safe. Ronaldo then let her hand lie on Lincoln's shoulder. And the only way I could do that is being out there, doing what I do best. I know the feeling, Lincoln started, moving his hand towards the small of the girl's back, giving a few gentle strokes. When my sisters first found out I was savvy, their thoughts were split. My younger sisters thought it was cool, but my older sisters cared more about my safety and wished I'd stop. I even got into several arguments with Lori about it. He stayed silent for a moment, letting the wave of depression was over him before mustering the strength to continue. There were just days we were at home, just didn't feel like home. Everything was the way it was tense, like we were waiting for a bomb to go off. A few more times when me and Lori argued, it almost got physical. And while I know we both did some things we shouldn't have said to each other, there was a level of understanding. She was just a bit worried about losing another family member since we already lost our parents. And if I had to be honest, Lori had become more like Mom in many ways since we were both orphaned. But I was just torn. I wanted to follow my gut. I really wanted to listen to Lori, but I also wanted to do my best on keeping them safe. If I could have had it both ways, it'd be easy. Lincoln let out a sigh to escape him. But it never is. How did you manage to change their minds? Ronaldo asked as she glanced up. Did they just eventually give up trying to stop you, even though it hurt them along the inside? Lincoln managed to smile. Kinda. Instead, they decided to join me. His smile soon disappeared with sadness regaining controls. Guess even hero families still have problems. The savvy crime fighter glanced at her. So, what happened to everyone else? As far as I know, they're still hiding out at the base. Lily especially came in to visit you a few times and will likely be screaming in ear front for not calling her to wake you up. They weren't hit too much, just some mild bruising that went away already. Your other sisters, though? Ronaldo then paused to gather her thoughts, preparing Lincoln with some grim news. Lori had all the bullets I shot her with removed, but she's still weak and can't eat too much. Lenny, she has a skull fracture, and it's unknown if she'll wake up. Don't know where she got it from, but I think she probably hit a boiler with her head. And you already know Lynn is still in the ICU and is unlikely to wake up soon. She's got several broken ribs. Her legs aren't in good shape, and I heard something about her spine or whatever. The sharpshooter could see the hidden distress in Lincoln's eyes. The possibility of losing any of his sisters would be pretty hard to bear. Something she already went through when Bobby was shot all those months ago. However, I heard the doctor said that they were at least stable, so they'll live, I think. This didn't help the mood that Lincoln gave a huff. Whatever or not, the Bolton was in despair unnoticed to her, but Ronaldo continued. Your other sisters are someone out there. That Joker and Rocker are doing okay, although I saw the spooky one came out once to get her ears checked. As for the smaller ones with glasses is fine, and the other two twins, I think they are. Well, except for one who acts like a spoiled brat, but she got a bad arm now that I took a shot at her. Lincoln was about to respond when he heard the talking at the door. I urgently need to see my ailing brother, please, came a muffled voice that reeked off highly neglect. Hate to break it to you, sweetie, but your brother is a known criminal, and I'm already hesitant to let one person look at him. The officer said, who was likely a female, responded back. And I regret to inform you, the shuffling could be heard, I wasn't asking. What the? Bzz. Both tweens then glanced back at each other in confusion before a loud thud was heard. The door opened to reveal Lisa, dressed in her plain black clothing, struggling with dragging the fallen cop into the room. The couple immediately went into panic. With Lincoln being fearful for his life, Ronaldo quickly digging into her backpack. Ignoring the pain in her leg, she pulled out a heavy revolver, her father's gun. Then she stuffed herself into Lincoln's front and pointed directly at the 4-year-old. Lisa heaved a sigh of relief before kicking the door shut, only to give it a girlish yelp upon noticing the weapon being aimed at her. Raising her hands defensively, "Please put that away. I am not here to cause any further harm." "Like I'll believe that. You just killed a cop for all I know," the Hispanic girl retorted. "She's not dead," Lisa stated, reaching behind her person and holding out the taser gun. "I just left enough voltage to keep her unconscious for a few hours." She then dropped it to the floor and kicked it out of reach. "What is it that you want, Lisa?" Lincoln squeaked, hugging the bedsheets cuddled to himself. The prodigy cleared her throat. "After all the disastrous brawl at Royal Woods Lumberyard, and after reviewing that footage I could retrieve from the security system, I've come to the conclusion that none of our teams were in any condition to handle our usual slew of villains and high-ranking crimes planned out like bank robberies. It is also," Lisa paused, at the thought of her sisters in various conditions flashing through her mind. It's allowed everyone to reflect on her actions, which are not remotely positive in any way. It goes without saying that hardly anyone has been gotten any sleep over the past 120 hours. The little girl rubbed her eyes a bit, which Ronaldo noticed very few, slightly visible bags under them. Regardless, the sharpshooter wasn't convinced the little sob story. Yeah, you guys are a bit worried about your 3 sisters," Ronaldo spat accidentally, "but none of the resorts of concern for your brother." "That's not true," Lisa retorted, glaring back at the sharpshooter. "Yes, I intended to bodily harm towards Lincoln, but I won't deny that. But we never wanted his death." Lynn was about to mime that reality after she defeated him. "And defeated me." Lincoln spoke quietly as the girls turned to him. I had to beg her not to do it before she let me go." Lisa pierced her lips, holding down a frustrated growl as she exhaled through her nose. "Neither myself or my other siblings were previously aware of this until now. If she were awake, I'd definitely give her the massive lecture about following orders." "Still doesn't explain what the heck you're doing here," Ronaldo reminded him, slightly thumbing down the hammer with the revolver. "Now spill before I decide to put you into bed." Lisa took a bag off and unzipped her pocket, pulling out what appeared to be some type of medical case. The prodigy opened the case and turned it towards him, revealing 5 syringes with green fluid contained within. "Ever since our last altercation, I have been working tirelessly to ensure the health for everybody, encouraging receiving intense medical treatment. Everyone in the family, including myself, afraid of losing another over a petty squabble that put 4 of our siblings, Lincoln included, in the emergency room. God forbid if any of them to perish from their injuries." Lisa had to stop for a moment to collect herself. "With the death of their parents coming to the forefront of their immense brain, we are literally all that remains of our family. After mother and father ultimately passing, we can't afford to lose anyone else." She took a syringe, giving the needle a flick with her fingers. This potent healing solution that could return to the body to 100% functionally. I had the prototype ready all the time, but Clyde had stolen it before I could properly test it. Lincoln's eyes widened a bit. You knew about that?" Lisa gave a short nod. "Saw everything on my security feed. I would have notified my sisters about this, but I want to see if my long tenuous labor paid off. There was a 20% chance the body would reject the drug and eventually lead to sympathetic organ failure, but it'd been more so the chance of unknown mutation." She spoke monotonically while adjusting her specs. The part about the organ failure made Lincoln's pupils shrink down as best as they could. Ronaldo already gained rightfully irate at Lisa's uncaring attitude. Her fingers twirled around the trigger. "You sick little..." the Latina started. But given how quickly Lincoln must have recovered from his injuries that would have left them bedridden for 40 days, I could safely assume my project was a success. The 4-year-old took out another syringe. With this batch, I have further increased the chance of body rejecting the fluid as well. I'll decrease it, as well as the chance of mutation. Adding on to this, I have not fully fixed Lola's damaged scapula, but I have done the same for Lucy's auditory nerves. She walks over and placed them on the bed. These should cure you as little as a few minutes. Ronaldo glared at Lisa for a few moments before giving a huff as she put the gun behind her. Picking up the syringe, she eyed it critically at Wissett, rotating her fingers, forcing it back to the prodigy and focusing. How do we know you aren't lying and this isn't some kind of poison? Lisa calmly rolled up her sleeve, showing part of her forearm that had a spot of irritated skin with a small hole in the center. While it may not be valid proof, I have tested on myself. Rolling her sleeve back down, Lily left some practically nasty purple blemishes on my face and eye. Now, unfortunately, I must be quick to give these to my other siblings. The brunette backed away from the bed, grabbing her case off the floor and shuffling into her bag. I don't get it, Lincoln stated, eyeing his little sister uncertainty. First Lynn almost kills me, then risks her life for me when she could have left me behind? And now you're helping us, Lisa? Just why? Why are you doing this now of all times? He lifted his hand that was cuffed to the bed. You guys labeled me as a criminal. I thought you preferred to see me in jail or stuck in bed for the rest of my life. Lisa strapped her bag into the person. Family ties runs deeper than you may realize, Lincoln. Turning around, while our actions may not have been the most logical approach, you could say that we weren't in the best mental state when attempting to resolve our issues. Not only that, Lisa whipped out her tablet, swiping fingers across the screen a few times. I suspect there was more going on of this whole scenario than we realized. Lincoln had a hunch of what Lisa was saying, much what she might be referring to. He couldn't assume much. What do you mean? Tell me, Lisa squinted her eyes, her tongue sticking out as she continued to fiddle with the screen. Did you notice anything off in these? Came her question, passing between the tablet. Several pictures taken from the security cameras in the warehouse showed the girls at different stages during the fight. To Ronalda, she didn't see anything out of place. Part of it might have to do with the fact that she was in a simmering rage, burning within. However, Lincoln, on the other hand, spotted something that almost immediately blowing up a few pictures. The heroic detective noticed odd coloring of each of the sisters' eyes. Only one who appeared to be normal was Lily. Given the picture of herself and Lisa fighting on the catwalk. This can't be right. Lisa, Lincoln muttered. No one in our family has yellow eyes, but I saw Lori and Lynn had them. Even Lori has blue and Lynn had brown. Ronalda pierced her lips and thought. She scratched her head. Now that I think about it, I think I saw it too. Not with just Lori, but Lenny too, and the princess girl. Lola, Lisa corrected, and that was precisely my point. She took the tablet back. There's something strange going on, and the little girl paused, seeming hesitant to continue. While it might seem extremely impolite to ask you this, as we don't deserve your help, I don't know if there's any other persons who can handle a task like this. Lincoln didn't immediately respond after a few moments, so Lisa continued. Please get to the bottom of what is going on with us before we lose our minds completely. The prodigy then took her cue to leave, though not before checking to make sure the cop was still out cold. Satisfied with her analysis, the prodigy collected her taser gun and walked onto the hallway, made a beeline for Lori's room. Ronalda watched the floor before turning back to Lincoln. So, she grabbed her revolver, stashed it back in her bag. What was she talking about them being under some mind control? It didn't seem like it. We were fully aware of what we were doing. Lincoln's eyebrows tilted down a bit. As unexpected flash, anger glowed through them. Now this wasn't the time to dwell on it though. I did notice Lynn's eyes turn back to their usual colors just before Lincoln's lips quivered a little. The loud, soon then shaking his head, tried to move on from that horrible experience. Anything really bad happen? If it's that mind-controlled? Lincoln squinted his eyes a bit as he mulled and thought. Me and Clyde just haven't heard anything about a certain vampire for months now. Ronalda's eyes went wide. Out of all the villains she could think of, there was one in particular that had a great likiness towards anything dark and sinister, along with the gross habit of messing up with other people, just for the hell out of it. You think she might have something to do with this? Most likely. If hearing what Lucy talks about anything, it's supposed to be one of her abilities. Well, that just makes things dandy, the sharpshooter spoke dryly, shifting her gaze over to the syringe in hand. What do we do about this? Lincoln gazed at the medical tool for a bit, hesitant as the sudden yelp from one person who likely orchestrated the coup against him. Clyde gave me one of those before, and I felt better in seconds. He grabbed the other, eyeing the substance, sloshing down the container. Looks the same too. Even then, it might still be a trap. Ronaldo gripped the tool in her hand tightly. I'll go first. She positioned the needle against her vein in the arm. Lincoln, if I die from this, just know that... A tint of red formed in, and as she bit her lip. To just know that I've always liked you. Before Lincoln could give his own response, Ronaldo injected herself with a strange mixture. It felt weird and uncomfortable as the foreign liquid entered her bloodstream, soon making her way through the circulatory system. At first, the tomboy thought her arm might be experiencing tissue death as the substance ate away through its body, or possibly organ failure as Lisa's project worked its way through her body. The slowest deaths were way worse, as she had proven to prefer to make kills quickly. Doesn't that stop Ronaldo from toying with her victims? They didn't deserve it, though. To her surprise, Ronaldo barely felt a thing. Well, not necessarily nothing, but the Latina started to feel as if she was wrapped in a warm, fuzzy blanket. She moved the fingers of her hand that had been stitched, quite surprised to feel no amount of pain, just moving in one digit. Even then, a dull ache that pierced its leg soon vanished like it never happened in the first place. Taking a risk, Ronaldo undid the straps of her cast before slipping it off entirely. Fresh skin marred the spot where her skin was pierced, only leaving a pink tint on the exact spot where the sharp cut her. Wriggling her toes a bit, guess she wasn't lying. Lincoln hummed in approval, soon ejecting himself with the other syringe. Like his girlfriend, his body started to feel immense better, although he shuddered a bit as his bones popped back into place, along with the odd sensation of his missing teeth growing back. The patch around his eyes started to feel uncomfortable, to which the lad started to undo the tape and held it back in place. Wincing a bit as the skin and hair was pulled, Lincoln soon removed the patch, blinking his right eye a few times, and his perception was increased. Rubbing the socket to get rid of any tiny dead skin, Lincoln was surprised and delighted to find his vision was back to its 20 plus 20. Well, that feels much. The boy laid back on the bed. Better. Ronaldo grinned at her boyfriend, soon climbing off the bed. Unfortunately, the moment she put weight on recently healed leg slipped out of under her. Lincoln jolted up upon hearing the thud echoing around the room. Soon scrambling over to his side, Ronnie Ann slipped off. Ronnie Ann? I'm okay. My leg is still asleep, the tomboy groaned, gripping onto the railing herself to hold upright. She eyed the handcuffs attached to Lincoln's bed before turning back to the sleeping officer. Give me a second. Hobbling over on one leg, she knelt down and paddled the woman's body before finding a set of keys. Unclipping them from her belt, the Latina then hopped back to the bed, held the key to the cuffs for a moment before fiddling with the keys until she thought she had found the right size. It was a perfect match as Ronaldo inserted the key and twisted the lock, the latch becoming undone around the bed before doing the same to Lincoln's hands. Thanks. Lincoln rubbed his wrist, glancing at the cop sprawled on the floor. What about her? Ronaldo gave a wide smirk. Oh, don't worry about her. She spoke as she twirled the cuffs in her hands and shifted over to the coupe. Soon after the cop, soon stopping them from wiping the cuffs onto her wrist. Don't just worry about getting her out of here, and we'll just find the hideout. We'll figure something out for you later. Lincoln raised a brow as he climbed out of bed, his legs feeling a bit wobbly due to their lack of use for a few days. What about you? Ronaldo then had her tongue sticking out practically as she turned to the cop onto her stomach, moving her hands towards her back and strapped the cuffs on. Besides, Mom, no one knows her identity, so you could just easily say you've gotten away with it when I wasn't looking. She stood back up after making sure the cuffs were secure. Lincoln gave a short sigh. So much for having a decent rep. Tomboy placed his hand on the wall. I hardly had one anyway, so why do you not see me cry about it? True, he did give a quick check around the room, a bit dismayed that there was no spare clothing for him to wear. Guess I'm gonna have to stick with this gown until we could find a store. Lincoln then glanced over at Ronaldo, a devious grin forming his head. But first, a wide smirk started to form externally. Before I leave, I got one thing I really need to do. Ronaldo formed a confused stare as she pushed off the wall. The tomboy was about to voice her thoughts when Lincoln suddenly grabbed her by the arms and pulled her to a kiss. Her eyes nearly popped out of her skull as they held position for a few moments before Lincoln took his lips off of hers. Thanks for waiting to wake me up. He then lightly kissed her on the nose before leaning close to the Latina's hair. And that was for the surprise attack last week. Before the sharpshooter could respond, Lincoln took his leave. He checked the hall to make sure no other doctors or cops were around before following the signs towards the set of stairs. Ronaldo blinked as she continued to stare at the door with her eyes as they were still the size of snack plates when her mouth was hanging open slightly. Once her brain finally restarted itself, she shut her trap, which formed into a cute smile as her eyelids fell halfway. I'm so lucky I got his attention. While Lincoln was asleep in his room, Clyde paced back and forth in the living room, occasionally checking the front door if it would open any minute. Beads of sweat were on his forehead as he checked the time. Okay, it's almost 4:30. You could do this, Clyde. Just trying to know your enemy. He breathed into a paper bag before exhaling, doing his best to keep a determined look from his faltering. Following his friend's advice, Clyde finally relented to invite Bobby over so they could hang out. Despite his busy schedule, the oldest Santiago child was able to make time for the Clydesdale, even mentioning how much fun they had at the town fair earlier in the seasons. Clyde had an awkward smile during this whole talk over the phone before quickly asking if he could come over. Bobby had to pause to register everything Clyde was saying before agreeing. And now for the moment of truth. Clyde stopped his pace until he heard the doorbell ring, with Cleopatra and Neptune meowing curiously as the eldest cat approached the door. He knew it couldn't have been his dad's as they have the keys, and the nerdy boy highly doubted the Loud siblings would risk a visit. Not to mention that Clyde have any change of plans with his other friends today. Gingerly walking towards the door, the boy lifted a shaky hand before swinging it open. What would normally be the best greeting anyone could ever, it just felt weird to him. "Sup, Clydesdale?" Bobby spoke, holding out his extended fist. "Hey!" Clyde smiled nervously as he bumped fists with the teen.